the rest of their lives to getting answers about his disappearance.
Right there. See it? Look. There's another spark. You see what else?
Hello and welcome back to Tales from Delphi National Park, the podcast where my friend Ben and I talk about the weird, scary, and mysterious true stories that happen in our neck of the woods. My name is Hunter, and as always, I am joined by Ben. Ben, it's been a while.
It's been 2 years, but I'm
It's
glad
been
we were
2
able to get the podcast
years.
back together after all this time. I've had a kid. You've had 3.
Yeah, in 2 years. That's crazy.
3 kids, 2 wives. What a story, man. I don't know if this podcast is going to be the best place to tell it, but, you know, maybe someday.
Yeah. If you wanna hear that story, just let us know.
But yeah, it has been a while. In all seriousness, it's been like, well, technically it's only been like around a month, but
Yeah.
I guess they won't know about that until later.
Well, Well,
I don't know what I can say.
we've been gone doing stuff. We were actually gonna do something we were really, really excited about. We recorded a video. We're still gonna do it, so I'm gonna keep it a mystery for those who are listening and those who are, watching. But for now, at least, we'll keep it a mystery. But unfortunately, we got back, we started editing it, and then I realized the audio is unusable. So that's a little bit of a bummer.
To be fair, I guess, can I at least reveal, like, we went to a place
We did go
in
somewhere.
person somewhere
Yeah.
and tried to record some stuff. And like you said, the audio ended up not being, it would have
It
been
didn't
not
work.
a workable thing to release. So
It wouldn't have been fun for you to listen to,
No.
which is kind of the main thing of a podcast. So we were
Yeah.
like, probably not.
it's just the audio side of it wasn't great. So
Right.
we figured
Right.
for the podcast, might not be the
We
best.
shouldn't do that, yeah.
But we will be doing a makeup type episode, I think, is what we're
Yeah,
planning.
we'll actually be doing 2 makeup type episodes.
Well, makeup and then
technically,
we'll
a
do
makeup and then a new one.
Yeah, and it'll be so we'll be able to cover that stuff that we did
Yes.
there as well as
Yes.
do something new. So
Yeah.
things to come.
Um,
Subscribe.
Things to come. So, hey, yeah, if you want to, that's a great point, Ben. If you want to get in the know, you can go down and subscribe. We'd love for you to subscribe to our channel. I think our current goal is like 1,000 subscribers, which seems a lot right now, but we're really excited to try to get there.
Yeah, well, yeah.
And
Taking it
show
slow.
it to the YouTube algorithm that, we can make it too.
I'll tell you
We
what.
have a space.
The YouTube algorithm recently has been. I know you texted me like a couple days
Much
ago. You're
better.
like, it's promoting small content, and that's true. It's honestly messing up my homepage right now because I keep getting all these new channels. Where I'm like, I
You're
want to
like,
watch the
"Please
same.
stop."
I want to watch the same 3 things. So stop showing me
Every
these
single
new.
day.
I look at the subscriber count and I'm like under like 5,000. What are we doing? So,
You're the reason why you're the reason these big
It's
companies
people
and
like
big
me
channels are getting taken
that are
over.
hindering our own success because I'm like,
Exactly.
I want what's approved by the masses.
Exactly.
Get this niche content
Man.
away. So,
Gosh, golly, man.
but I
No,
mean,
it's-
hey, maybe someone not me will look at it and be like,
yeah,
hey,
they'll be
let me
like,
check
"Oh,
that
this
out.
is good.
2 handsome
Yeah,
men.
check it out. We'll see.
What was that?
2 handsome men. I did get someone was like, that was one of my friends. I was like, can you provide some feedback? And they're like, yeah, you do stuff that we don't know what you're doing on like
The audio
actual
format?
Spotify.
Well, that's their fault.
That is their fault. Come to
I mean,
YouTube.
like 100%.
Or stay on Spotify. We posted on Spotify for a reason, so you can stay there. It's okay.
Is it not
But-
like a common experience to just like? I feel like I do that a lot when I'm listening to podcasts that are also on YouTube. Like I'll hear something, I'm like, I want to know what they did, and then
I want to know what they did.
But
Yeah.
maybe we need
So
to do
here's
a.
what you can do for us real quick, y'all.
Yeah.
Listen to it full length on Spotify, then come to YouTube, watch it full length, then go to Apple Podcasts, leave it on in the car, and then watch all of our shorts. That's what you need to do right now. That's
We're gonna
it's really
do-
a small menial task.
We're gonna do Justin Bieber yummy numbers. That's all I'm saying. Do you know about
What?
when he released? You know the song
No.
"Yummy" by Justin Bieber?
Yeah, I know. Yummy.
There were all these posts, some of which was from like I think his studio, basically saying like we need to get this song to #1. So like play it while you sleep. Like play it all the
Oh.
time. Just leave it running in the background on repeat so we can boost these numbers and make it one in the Billboard. For
That's
Justin.
funny.
For Justin.
The yummy numbers.
So that's what we need to
But
do.
anyway, yes.
Anyway.
On all serious note, though, we're very happy you're here.
Yeah.
We want you to get the yummy numbers up.
Mm-hmm.
But we're really excited to keep on doing this. So I think our goal is going to just be we're going to try to post a lot more. We
Daily
have some fun
uploads.
content that's coming up. Not daily. I don't think we can deal with daily. We can barely do monthly right now, man.
Bi-monthly, yeah.
So we're going to try to do twice a month. I think that is our goal.
I think
and we'll
that's
see if that
fair.
stays.
Every 2 weeks, especially, yeah. Part of it's not doing it until this point was me. I was very busy. I just got done with
Well,
a
yeah,
final
so-
for a course in med school, and it was towards the end because I wasn't keeping up with well. It made it very like the last 2 weeks have been very busy. But I'm hopefully heading into this new block going to be a little more on top of things, which will help on my end. And then Hunter just needs to stop being lazy. That's
That's pretty much my
long of
biggest
it,
deal.
long and short of it.
Yeah. I don't do anything.
Look at that sweater he has on.
Yeah, I look like a pothead
Visual
on this one.
listeners, those using YouTube. Look at that cozy
Look
sweater.
at this sweater.
Look how
It's very
snug
cozy.
and cozy he is. How would,
Cozy and
I wouldn't do
sweaty
anything
and
either if I was dressed like
Gross
that.
and cute all at the same time. You know.
So Hunter, what are we
No,
talking
so
about
yes,
today?
Yes. Yes. We're talking about today, but first, you can check us out on
Yeah.
YouTube. Get us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you can get your audio, video, whatever. We're really focusing on YouTube right now, so if you could subscribe, share, like, comment, give us feedback. We always say
100%.
that at the end of the episode, but I'm going to say it at the beginning of the episode. Give us feedback. We definitely are listening to it right now. And if any time you can give a YouTuber feedback, right now is the time to do it when they're very, very young,
Vulnerable.
and still new to the channel. Yeah,
Malleable,
vulnerable, and very,
open to
like,
manipulation.
very insecure.
Yeah.
Very insecure, very open to manipulation. You know.
Mm.
But anyway, all to be said, we're excited. How about Ben? I'll ask you. What are we talking about today?
Oh, well, that's a great question, Hunter. Today, we are going to be talking about, I think, one of the more prominent, what's the word, cryptid / UFO sightings in American history, if I may say so. And that would be
Yes, you could say that.
what's called the Flatwoods Monster. I'm sure a lot of people listening, if they're into any of this stuff, have probably heard of this event. And that's what we kind of want to bring to you today, just to talk about what happened and what the possible explanations are for it, because that's what we do. We take mysterious
do that.
things, and I look them up on Wikipedia and then realize a lot of times they're not that mysterious, but at least we do the work, you know?
We do the work. We're trying to get that, and that's always been our goal. Try to get as true as we could possibly get to you.
Yep.
So
As true
but
as-
we'll start it out.
Wikipedia can do, you know?
As true as Wikipedia can give us.
To be fair, this one I think I did actually. I looked up a lot of newspaper clippings from the time, and so
Yes,
I think I have a fairly good understanding of some of the.
This
some of
one's
it.
significant for many reasons too. Like we were watching the anime Dan.
It's in that.
And,
That's one of the
it's
things that
in
kept
that.
coming up when I looked
Yeah.
it up.
It was the Flatwoods monster like in Dan, and they fight it as like one of their like he's an alien that they have to fight.
He's a
Or something
monster
like
because that's
that.
the show's about like monsters and aliens essentially, and
Yeah, monsters and
everything
aliens
is
and, like,
real
figuring out.
and all that
Like
stuff.
some aliens that you've known have actually been like a ghost, and some ghosts have been monster. It's very fun.
Oh yeah, it's
I love
like it's
it.
like
Very good
ghosts and aliens, right? Like
Yeah, ghosts and aliens.
Yeah.
And one of them believes like ghosts exist, and the other. Anyway, sorry,
Anyway.
too much off track, but you get the
Anyway.
idea. I saw it in that one, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's so funny that's what we're gonna do it off of. So
oh yeah.
okay, without further ado, then let's get cozy, gather around the campfire, and hear some tales from Delphi National Park.
I didn't know if you like it.
I do. It gives us character, you know.
Okay. I'll try to manufacture more of
Whether
that
I
character
think
for
it, yeah,
you.
I'll try to manufacture.
See how it boosts the numbers.
I'll try to manufacture personality.
Yeah, I'll try to build some
Um,
of that up, some of that artifice. Anyway,
So the Flatwoods Monster. Flatwoods Monster is, again, as we said, one of the more I would say it's one of those that you're like, this is fascinating, at least.
Yeah.
And it's not only that, but we'll have a description of the monster later. But it looks really specific. It's like the which we can show a picture right now and we'll describe it. But it's like, it has like a teardrop head. It's all red. It has like a shirt on with a dress.
yeah,
It has glowing
it's very
yellow
distinct.
eyes.
Yeah.
It's distinct. And so people have like used it, and I'll show one photo of what everybody thinks it looks like, and then just like people have made it into like a very cute little very cute little like toys and trinkets and you know, little badge. I think I even have a badge of it. Hold on, wait. I gotta go get it.
Yeah, you go get it. And while Hunter's gone, I'll keep the listeners and viewers entertained by pointing to things in my room. Rolling Stones logo, Squidward's Bold and Brash, not the original, it's just a recopy. TV tonight we have Batman 1989, and
What are you
Hunter
saying?
has a big aspiration to make this podcast great. So only positive things.
Thanks for noticing. Here's this one.
Oh, you just have it.
Yeah.
Oh, you're a full-on fan of this, dude. That's why. That's what we're talking about.
He's like
You're
very
a
here you go, now
fanboy.
it's focusing.
I feel like you're a biased
it's-
source then.
I mean, maybe.
Yeah.
But again, like, it's very, like, I don't know. It's very cute. People have made it.
It's
like,
very
a big thing, like
it's very iconic. Like it's like an icon that's very recognizable. It's
like
simultaneously
Bigfoot.
yeah, it's like kind of like Bigfoot, very recognizable.
Mothman.
It's
Yeah.
simultaneously very colorful, but also depending on how you see it illustrated, you can also see how it'd be very imposing.
Yeah, it's very creepy description of what it is. But-
yeah.
So yeah, it's teardrop head, glowing yellow eyes for the audio listeners, like a T-shirt, like almost like a dress type of thing,
Yeah.
a belt, and it like glows, and so it's just like a, you know, kind of creepy. So this is the Flatwoods Monster.
Speaking of which, Hunter,
And-
in what context was this monster first seen? Do you have a story that maybe we could turn to, like a retelling, perhaps?
Oh, I think I actually do.
Oh, well, fancy that.
It was almost fully dark on the evening of September. I'm joking.
So how we're gonna start
This goes
this
into it.
is we're gonna read a retelling of it that is from the Braxton County, which is the county in which this monster is seen. They're like tourism website, and it basically does, I think, a pretty decent, like, simple telling of what the event was where this monster was seen. So credit to them. We're gonna be using their retelling of it. You can go check out their website. I'll probably somewhere provide the link specifically to this one just because we're reading from them, so I want to definitely give them a shout out. It'll probably be in the description. I'll make sure to put it there. So, but yeah, if
Cool.
you, Hunter, want to take us away,
Yeah, I can read it.
giving us the story of the Flatwoods Monster and how it was first seen.
All right, so Flatwoods Monster was almost fully dark on the evening of September 12th, 1952. Edward May, Freddie May, Neil Nunley, and Tom Heyer, all young residents of the town of Flatwoods, were playing on the lawn of the Flatwoods Elementary School. Suddenly, a bright light streaked across the sky overhead and appeared to crash into a hillside on G. Bailey Fisher's farm. The boys ran to see what it was they saw in the sky. The Mays' home was on their way, so they stopped to tell their mother, Kathleen May, what they had seen. Kathleen called on National Guardsman Eugene Lemon and the family dog Richie to accompany her and the boys to the crash. There's your setup.
There you go.
So
I like the inclusion of like the dog. Like she
yeah, they got
like
the
called
dog.
on like a guy who's like a National Guardsman, and then it's just like the dog is. I was like, hey Richie, let's go. And he was just like, yeah.
Yeah, we can do this. Which makes like yeah, it's like okay, so they've seen this thing off the prospect. It's probably like they're probably thinking like a plane crash, and that's probably why they're like, hey, we need to get like an official guy here to come with us
Yeah, I mean,
and
like
talk through it.
I would if I was going to any situation where I wanted to like to kind of be looking for something or be observant, I would 100% bring my dog because it's just
Yes.
dogs notice things that people just don't. They have an
Right.
extra level. Also,
Extra sense.
from the newspaper clippings I read, the kids because this is the 52, right? 1952. Like UFOs,
Yeah, 1952.
UFOs are all the rage right now. Like I
Right,
think the
right.
Roswell incident, which is probably something we could talk about at some point, is happened like 5 years before this. It's after like World War II, so a lot of like everyone's kind of home. You got UFOs on the mind, and I think the kids, at least when they saw it, their first thought was like, "Oh my gosh, it's a flying saucer!" Like you see, like in the
Right,
newspapers, they talk
right.
about like in quotes like a flying saucer. That's what they saw or the thought they saw. So,
Right.
the mom probably thinking maybe something more practical. Though at that point, like I'm sure there were adults too who were thinking about stuff like that and were
Right.
maybe
like,
at least
ooh.
considering it a possibility. So
Right.
a UFO or something more supernatural, I think, was definitely at least on some of these people's
Their minds.
Yeah,
Right.
going into
Right.
it. But anyway,
So, upon reaching the site of the crash, the group saw a pulsing red light. Lemon shined his flashlight up the hill, and the group witnessed a terrifying sight. So, this is the description, kind of what we said before, about a 10-foot tall creature with a head shaped like a spade and what appeared to be a dark metal dress. The creature's hands were twisted and clawed, and what seemed to be its eyes glowed an eerie orange color. It appeared to be levitating off the ground. A strange, sickening mist hung in the air. The creature hissed and glided quickly toward the witnesses. The group then turned and fled in terror. I'll read this real quick. Some of the members of the group suffered from throat irritation, vomiting, nausea, which persisted for days. These symptoms were passed off as a side of effects of hysteria, but it was worth noting that there are also several telltale signs of exposure to mustard gas. Okay, very interesting. So anyway, you got the description
yeah,
of this imposing creature. Which 10 foot tall and like floating, with
Kind of
glowing yellow eyes.
imposing, a little bit intimidating.
Yeah, just a little bit. Just-
Especially when you, I guess what I was gonna say was like Lemon, who they don't. Okay, Hunter, when you hear National Guardsman, who are you picturing? Like what type of person? Like
oh, what type of guy?
or build, age, place in life.
I probably put him actually at like maybe 35-ish, maybe 40-ish. Kind of like middle-aged, like probably maybe bulky in build, but not like insanely strong. Why? What is his actual like build?
Well, I guess build. I just didn't want to like give it away, but like I imagine when I read National Guardsman like a grown guy, like 30, 40. He was 17. So I don't know why they describe him like he was a part of the National Guard, but he was like a 17-year-old kid.
Okay, interesting.
So, which is I again, like I feel like with a lot of these stories, there's like stuff built up around it where like there's things have connotations and implications, and I think when you hear National Guardman, it's like, oh, they went out with somebody who was
he was official.
equipped.
Well, that's what I thought when you said
He's like an
that.
official guy, but it was just like a 17-year-old guy
Oh, okay,
who was
that's
their
funny.
neighbor,
Yeah, did not.
which is interesting. But they talked
Yeah, it is
about
really interesting.
how he was leading the party of people, which was mainly composed of the kids who were from ages like 10 to 14, him as a
And the mom.
17-year-old, and then the mom.
And the dog.
And they get onto like near the site where they think this object they saw flying above landed, and they start to notice a mist around them
Yeah,
that has
here.
that specific smell. The smell that they describe is like a burning metal or like gasoline scent that
Yep.
kind of burn their nostrils. And then Lemon, who's leading the group with his flashlight, notices out of the corner of his eye a pair of eyes or something like glowing. And initially, as he's turning to it, he's thinking it's like some sort of animal. Like I think a possum was an animal that was mentioned, like a deer. He's not necessarily expecting anything major. And then when he gets his flashlight on it, they see this, which
This.
was, the 10-foot tall figure
Yeah.
of some type with these red head shaped in a weird way and glowing eyes and a green body that had like this weird metallic nature to it. So he falls back. He's like a 17-year-old.
Understandably.
Understandably,
Right.
like he's not like, because I think this story you read that and you're like, oh my gosh, like this thing must have been like crazy terrifying. But it's like, yeah, I'm sure it was terrifying, but he was also like a kid. But he sees
Right.
this, he falls back, screams, and then everyone just like charges off running because he drops the flashlight. It's the dark.
Yeah.
They don't really know what they've seen. And then afterwards, they talk about how they were feeling nauseous and even like throwing up like in the days following this. Like it wasn't even just
Yeah.
like the hour or two after. It was like noticeably for like a long period of time. They had symptoms almost like the mist or smell, whatever was in the air was maybe causing those symptoms. And that's a big
Yeah.
question of this whole mystery is like, what was that? What was
that,
what were those like? What's the word? What were those happenings?
Gases.
Yeah, and like
Or,
what
what
was the
happened
source of
around-
it, and what is
Yeah.
any of this?
Yeah, and which is very interesting. Like, I don't know, it's very fascinating to think through what that could be. And I think there's like we'll get to that into our theories at the end.
Yeah,
but
I will say I think the mention of mustard gas is a bit much because like mustard gas does make you feel nauseous and throw up, but it also like melts your lungs. So I don't know if that would just be like a couple days of like
mustard
my
gas.
throat is kind of scratchy and I'm feeling like sick to my stomach. I feel like it'd be more like I'd die, but
yeah,
um,
my organs literally melt away as I'm just
yeah, like my nervous system is just fried, but
it's fine.
just
It's
my
whatever.
stomach ache, just a stomach ache.
But then a quick note, it said May and Lemon reported the incident to local authorities who researched the area that night and claimed to find nothing. So,
Yep.
and was that true? Did they find nothing?
Yeah.
Or didn't they? I thought they found like some kind of residue.
So I can go
Looking
into that now because I think everything Passes on the website is talking about like a few other sightings, which we can
chases.
kind of.
Yeah, well,
You want to do that now, or do you want me to kind of?
let's pause it now because this is like the main sighting that people talk about. This is a very like. This is the thing that popularized this legend. So the other ones right here, we can go into after we talk about it. But let's talk about this first. So,
Yep.
tell me about it.
So
Tell
I'm,
me some
I'm the
things
research,
that have yet to be.
the research.
Yeah, the
goblin.
research boy.
I did a lot of research. I wrote a bunch of
Research
notes.
Goblin.
Yes, I'm in my cave. So let's get into it. So as we've said, this monster, they see it. We know what it looks like. Some descriptions from the people themselves that I was able to gather from different newspapers. You have Lemon, 17-year-old, who noted it had a blushing face and green body that seemed to glow. That was a big thing they noted, that there was like almost light
It's glowing.
emanating from the being itself. Mrs. May, the mother, who is the oldest like witness here, she's not a kid, she is like an adult. So I feel like
An adult.
in a lot of ways
Right.
feels like the most credible, or at least the most like probably rational, level-headed probably.
Right.
She described it as a fire-breathing monster, 10 feet tall with a bright green body and a blood-red face. She also said it looked worse than Frankenstein and that it couldn't have been human and that it gave off an overwhelming metallic odor. So that's a nice comforting thought to come from
Fire-breathing monster. That's crazy.
which
With a red face that glows and gives off a scent so putrid that, like,
just burning your nostrils, your eyes are watering.
yeah.
A big thing, I think that this account doesn't mention, but that is also kind of core to this as well, is before they saw the monster. And there was one article I found that I'll give a shout out to real quick because it was very well put together. Written by B. Jesse, who is a writer who kind of researches Appalachian stuff, it seems. And they did a really good job of like compiling specific information, reading like primary sources. So
Yeah.
they gave us they put together kind of a series of specific events and how they happened. And they described it as Lemon and then one of the kids, specifically Nunley, who was 14 years old. So he was the oldest of the kids that first saw the UFO. They were walking in the front, and they were climbing up a hill to, like, basically the place where they thought the UFO had crashed, or the thing that the unidentified object had crashed. And they claimed to see about 50 feet down the hill orb, a big glowing like globe or orb that seemed to be either on fire or like pulsating some sort of red light, which is interesting because that was in like the primary sources, but you don't see that like mentioned a lot. Like on the Wikipedia page, it isn't like
Interesting.
It's
yeah.
just like, oh, there was a big glowing orb thing that they claimed to see. At least two of them did. And then after that is right when Lemon notices something moving out of the corner of his eye, turns his flashlight, and then they see the monster. And all of them in the party claimed to have seen that because they were all kind of up on the hill at that point, and that was when they all kind of saw that.
Gotcha. So the orb is like two of them saw it.
Yeah. So I guess maybe
And
it's
just this
less
huge ball of fire. Right?
Yeah, like this giant. At least it sounded like they described it as a huge object. And I think also important to note is Nunley, the 14-year-old kid with Lemon, when the guy who's collected a lot of the information about this at the time, his name's Gray Barker. He ended up being a big supernatural investigator after this, like looking into UFOs and paranormal stuff. But at the time,
so he was encouraged from this event to go do this.
Yeah, he's actually grew up in
Interesting.
Braxton County and then heard about this, drove down like a week later and interviewed all of these people, like the mother and the kids. And from his view, Nunley, the 14-year-old, seemed to be the most level-headed in describing what happened. And Nunley is one of the two who claimed to see the giant orb. So at least according to like his impression of it, the guy who had the most, in his mind, like reliable testimony tested to this. But yeah, we already talked about how they saw the monster and different descriptions of what it looked like. Another, I guess, interesting thing to note is the monster, after they saw it, seemed to charge at them as well as make some sort of like hissing sound.
Okay.
Most of the group claimed that it seemed to move in some sort of like erratic bobbing up and down motion towards them, which I think probably scared them even more because it's like,
Right.
there's
it's
this
like-
thing that's huge and now it's moving to me in like a fast, irregular
Yeah.
way.
No.
But
Wouldn't have appreciated that.
Yeah, me neither.
That would have been a poopy pants situation, you know.
Yeah, I can understand.
I just imagine that though. Like you're in
Yeah.
the woods, you're going to go see this thing. You're probably a little bit on edge. 'Cause like, what is this? And then you show up and you're like, okay, a huge glowing orb, and then you turn around and you just see this thing kind of like bobbing at you. And I mean, I would poop my pants.
Yeah.
Just straight up, man. I'm gonna be honest. I think I'd poop my pants in that moment.
Yep. I think I would too. Not much more to add to that. It's like, yeah. Because I hate the
would
scariest
suck.
idea to me is being out in the woods and encountering
Yes.
something. Like that is the most
Well,
primal fear to me.
And encountering something that's not something. Again, the thing about this is it's so unique. It's not like a Bigfoot, or it's not like a creature that I can look at and be like, that's kind of like a monkey, or that's kind of like just a big old ape. It's like what is this thing? It has like a metal dress. It's freaking emanating some kind of smell that's so nauseous. Like, I don't know. What
Yeah.
is that? I don't know. Anyway,
You
so that's my big thing.
you imagine these kids who are already kind of, especially the kids, because they're primed. They went into this like it's a flying saucer, and then, which I mean, you could say maybe colors their perception of it. Maybe like made it so that they perceived, interpreted things a certain way. But regardless,
Yeah.
they go up this hill. They start seeing this mist, and with it, there's this really heavy odor that's described as like sulfur or metal or gasoline. And then they see this figure that and it's dark. It's a flashlight going onto this figure. They get probably like a good 2 or 3 second look at it before it charges at them. Like your brain doesn't have time to process what's
Right, what's actually
happening.
going on.
Besides, there's something I've never seen before in my life, and now it's charging at me. Well, I guess one interesting thing to note about that, the one other detail, which maybe would be relevant later, is Nunley, who again, Gray Barker viewed as the most reliable, claimed that the creature moved in a very like steady arc towards them. It wasn't like the irregular bobbing. It was like almost like it was floating or flying towards them, which I just mentioned because it gets a little later into like what people think this could have been.
What the idea is. Okay.
Yeah. But anyway, I guess I can mention. Yeah.
So that's that. I could read if you want me to the investigation afterwards.
Yeah, if you want to.
So that's what's so.
If you just want to like, just kind of go read through parts of my notes. They're not necessarily all written like complete sentences. So.
Yeah, no. I'll say them as what I can.
Yeah.
So A. Lee Stewart, which did you mention Stewart?
No.
Already?
So he is a local journalist who hears about this very quickly, and goes there before the police get there. And I'll get into a second why the police, or you'll get into a second, I guess, why the police weren't there quickly. But he's the first guy on the scene, essentially.
Yeah. Okay. So he went down, and he brought an armed posse with this scene. Which, to be fair, if someone described this thing, I would be like, "We're getting guns."
Yeah, especially in
We're
West
not messing
Virginia, dude.
around.
It's like,
yeah, no, it's just
let's get our firearms that we all own, and we're gonna go
Yeah.
down and find this 10-foot tall
Exactly.
cryptid that we just this guy just saw. You know,
or at least we're gonna try to like investigate, and if this thing, which is such an American thing to do, to be like this, because a lot of people describe Braxie as like coming down, crashing, and then getting spooked. Like it's almost like they joke around that like it's like the sad, scared monster, and then these guys are like, "We're gonna go kill that thing." It's like, hey, it's like, oh my gosh, people, and it's like, yeah.
like Braxie is just like this innocent
Super
alien
innocent,
who just like
cute
crashed
little
by
alien who's
accident. He's stumbling out. He gets a bright light blind like flashed in his eyes. He's like, "Oh, I'm sorry." He like walks towards them, but then they run away. And then
Try
an
to,
hour
like,
later, this group of bearded like guys in flannels with shotguns show up.
Yeah, people have described it like Braxie as like, oh, he was just trying to like, he was lost and trying to figure out where he was, and he got spooked, and like, and that's just so funny to think that they just come in and just destroy this poor thing. Anyway, so they go in with an armed posse, and they don't find the monster, object, or mist. And so they were told of the sulfuric odor, and so they knelt down to smell the grass, and they did notice it smelled
Yep.
like sulfur, like metal, as they like a very imposing kind of metal.
It was specifically
And so-
Stewart. He was the one who thought, he's like, well, maybe the gas is dissipated.
Yeah.
The mist
Yep.
is gone at this point, so it's not foggy up there anymore for whatever reason. But he kneels down and he notes like, oh, the grass kind of does smell like what they were describing. So
Yep. So then the day after he reported finding, so he went then the day after, I'm guessing. So
Yeah,
finding
and-
skid marks.
like a lot of people were walking around at that point. Like the whole town was basically like,
Yeah.
what
they
happened?
all
We're
heard
gonna
this.
go
They're
look at
like,
this.
We got to go over here. And so skid marks and an odd gummy deposit spanning the distance from where the monster had been seen down to the large globular mass that had been at the bottom of the hill. Grass matted down where the large mass had been. He said the odor was still there, quote, sort of warm and sickening. Two places about 6 to 8 feet diameter where the brush was trampled down. And so he says this, I hate to say it, I believe it. but I hate to say I don't believe it. Is this wrong to give him a Southern? I'm so sorry if this.
No,
is
he's
wrong for me
he's
to
West
do that.
Virginian. Like,
Okay,
what,
sorry.
what do
I'll
you
say it
sound
again.
like?
I had to say I believe it, but I hate to say I don't believe it. Those people were scared baldly. Wait, those people were scared baldly scared, and
Badly
I sure
scared.
smelled something.
Yeah, you got it.
And then he said, "quote People don't make up that kind of story that quickly." So there's that journalist, local journalist.
Yep. He didn't
And
know for sure, but he's like, I smelled something, and they all seem to be saying the same thing. So yeah,
So-
that next part is just I'm so sorry, Hunter. These notes are just absolute crap.
No, they're
But
great. This is awesome.
This is
Don't-
amazing.
Don't put yourself down.
Well, I feel bad because it's just like me. It's like it's just words put together.
No,
from,
I
like,
see what
different
you were
things I
going for
clipped.
because
This next section,
they're-
I was basically just trying to say like the police, their response, because they're like
yeah,
the varied from 7 to 7 feet tall, 17 feet tall is the idea that the police eventually did get there, and then they kept noticing that like when people would talk about it, first the monster was 7 feet tall, and then it was 10 feet
And then it-
tall,
it
and then
got
it was
tall- it got
17
taller.
feet tall, and
yeah.
like all these reports. But yeah,
So sheriff and deputy were busy investigating a separate report of the small plane crashing over another county. And no evidence of plane crash were found at this site. Oh, hold on. Okay, this is interesting. So they went to go. Apparently, there was a plane crash in another county that they were investigating that night, and then they couldn't find anything.
yeah. So they were called
Oh,
a county
okay, very
over
interesting.
for a guy who thought he saw what a small like Cub plane crashing.
Okay.
And they go there, and there's nothing that they can find. And then while they're there, they get called by Mrs. May. And eventually, when they work their way back to Braxton, is when they show up, like later in the morning.
So yeah, this is next morning.
Yep.
They came in. They said they saw, heard, and smelled nothing.
Yep.
That was their quote. So then here comes the Air Force. Air Force Intelligence, as part of a now declassified Project Blue Book, sent 2 agents in the 1953 disguised as civilians to investigate. So interesting. you
Yeah.
know? Determined it was a meteor that had only appeared to land on a hill as it passed behind. What? A meteor that had only appeared to land on a hill as it passed behind it.
Basically, the idea that like
so
it
it
flies
looked
over
like
the
it
hill,
landed.
and it's like, oh, it landed behind that hill. When it's like, no, it's actually like miles up in the sky.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Okay. And so that was the mainstream explanation. That was what they had said. Was it?
Yeah, that was essentially what a lot of people said. The thing is, so Project Blue Book was classified until like decades later, and what it essentially was at Wright Pat Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio. They had set up a clearinghouse to collect a bunch of different reports on UFOs, because the Air Force essentially was at a point where they're like, we want to look into all of these and see if there's something real going on, because UFO mania is like on the rise. Is this something real? Is this like a national security threat? But also, we don't want to
Right.
worry people, so this is classified and everything's
Yeah.
fine actually, and none of like there's nothing's happening, but also we're gonna investigate it. So one of the earlier things they investigated was Flatwoods, like this incident, and apparently like nobody really knew that they had, but they determined for the U.S. Air Force that it probably was just a meteor that had been seen going over, and then everything else was just like hysteria, which gets
Hysteria.
into like the specific explanation that like nowadays is kind of considered the mainstream one, but that's kind of the next
Yeah,
section I
so-
have there. So
Yeah. Let's go ahead. Yeah, I'd be interested to hear their explanation for everything.
yeah,
I think then we could read the next
few sightings of
few
things.
sightings, and then we can talk through what we were thinking might actually have happened. So why don't you go out? This is what, according to the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry, Joe Nickel in 2000 said. Ben, why don't you tell me what he thinks this actually was?
Yeah, because this was a mystery for a long time. This was a big thing in the
Yeah.
news too. Like it was I think that year it was like the 11th, it doesn't sound that impressive, but it was like the 11th top national news story.
Well, that is pretty
Which,
impressive.
like, for back then, especially, like, it's newspapers and, like, it's whatever is on ABC, CBS, or NBC. So this was, like, talked about a lot. UFO sightings that were reported spiked after this. They were, like, the mother went up to New York City and was interviewed on a CBS program called We the People for, like, a special episode about this. So, like, it was in the
interesting
cultural zeitgeist. But like there were different explanations throughout the years. People talked about like anything from different animals that maybe they saw to like sulfur springs for the smell. But Joe Nichols, a guy who in 2000 he's a part of a thing called the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry, which is basically like an anti-conspiracy theory organization where they're like trying to find like what's a rational explanation for stuff like this. So his basic idea is that the bright light over the kids when they were playing in the school field was a meteor. And that's backed up by the, I think there's like different records of like the space astronomy like organizations at the time that showed that across Pennsylvania, Maryland, and West Virginia, there was a confirmed like meteor that passed over and was like clearly visible. So that would explain the initial like inciting event of all this. Then you get to the group of people, the kids and the mom and Lemon going up to the hill. And when they get up there, they have that smell, that odor with the mist. Now, the mist is fairly easily explainable because it's Appalachia. It gets foggy at night.
Yeah, it gets foggy.
Like, that's just the mountains. That's just that area. As far as the object they saw that was pulsating red, which, again, from the descriptions I've read, some people treat it just like it's a red pulsating light, and then others say it's like a ball of fire. So this one I'm kind of confused on, but a lot of the accounts just explain it as like a red pulsating light. And what Joe Nickel decided on as a possible explanation is either from their perspective it was like a aircraft, a plane flying over, or one of those towers that has like the red lights for, it's like a hazard tower for airplanes to avoid. So his idea is that they, from the perspective they were at, given that the smell is already happening, they're already kind of nervous because of the situation they're in. They see just like a red light in the middle of the forest, and they're like, what is that? That looks odd. Is that maybe the spacecraft? Maybe I see like an outline of something that I'm imagining as the spacecraft. And then the big, I guess the main figure here is that 10-foot tall Braxie. Like, what is that? And what and I think a lot of people now think that the 10-foot tall thing was, in real life, was a barn owl. Because the way the aliens described it has that like teardrop face, which pretty closely matches what I think
a barn owl.
Yeah, a barn owl's face. There's even like a specific type of owl that the guy, the person who wrote that article that I referenced earlier, that's really well done, they cite as like, this is probably the type of owl that would match this description most closely. That's the face. They think that the red glowing eyes are because it's an owl, and like their eyes do that when you shine a bright light in it. And then they explain the lower part of the body, like the green metallic part, as simply part of the trees and foliage that just happened to catch the light in the way under the owl when they got their glimpse at it. I think what backs us up even more is like the way that Braxie charges at them, because they noted like a hissing sound, which is what especially like, you know, like mother owls do when they're trying to protect like their young.
Let me put up I'll put up a photo right here of what someone did a
it's like the breakdown of like comparing the two.
It compares the two of like what a barn owl and what it could look like.
That's a great image, because it basically breaks down what I'm saying,
what it
here.
could have been, how it could have been.
This is like corroborated by the fact that a lot of the witnesses specifically said they noticed the face more than like the lower body. Like it appeared to be one unit, but like the thing they were focusing on was the face. Remember also that Nunley, who was the most reliable witness, noted that when it charged at them, it almost seemed like it was arcing, like flying, which would fit perfectly for an owl.
Right.
So they thinks Nickel thinks that that's basically what happened. That they were already kind of nervous. Did I talk about the odor at all?
Yeah, you had slowly brought it up, but not yet. So.
Oh yeah, yeah. So
It says
basically,
your local.
yeah. If you want to read that,
Yeah, so you said like a local type of grass with a similar smell, and there's sulfur springs.
yeah. So the two things I saw widely were either there were sulfur springs nearby, which I feel like would probably be easier to tell. Like you feel like somebody would have mentioned that. But what Stewart, the journalist who showed up, noted was when he smelled the grass, it was that sulfury odor. And in that really good article I'm referencing a lot, the author notes that even Stewart noted that that type of grass tends to like have that smell, and it's not normally super noticeable, like on its own. It's a type of grass that grows specifically in that area in West Virginia that has like an odor like that. And his thinking was that maybe because they were already kind of nervous, their senses are heightened, they're anxious, that maybe something like a slightly off smell is going to be more noticeable when you're in that state. Maybe it's something that you're going to like, you add it all together and then it's like, whoa, like I smelled something weird and I saw something weird. So that's kind of the mainstream explanation of that.
Yeah.
And then the symptoms, as far as like them being nauseous and throwing up afterwards and having the throat irritation. A lot of the sources I read, and Joe Nickel also thinks this, he attributes it just to the amount of like nervousness and anxiety they underwent and like the hysteria, like just your body's response to being terrified out of your mind. Like you're going to feel terrible for a while.
If you have seen this, like especially if I put in those shoes, like I would have huge residual anxiety just lurking throughout my rest of like I would be scared half to death.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of trauma to put on your brain so quickly than to be like, we're fine now. I think like it would make sense. So anyway, that makes sense to me.
Especially with like all of them besides the mom being like kids. And then like the only other person with them is a mom who has a group of 6 kids. And then she sees what looks like a monster, and it's like, oh my gosh, I'm here with all these kids that I have to protect. Of course, that's gonna like terrify the hell out of you, you know? Like,
oh yeah.
So it's like understandable. I think hysteria can have a connotation of like, oh, these, they were just a little crazy. When it's like, no, like you're in the forest in the dark at night.
Yeah.
You're already kind of nervous, and then you see something that you can't explain in the moment. Of course, you're gonna be terrified. Anyone would,
Right.
But yeah, the last thing I guess to mention is you mentioned this with the aftermath. The journalist noted the day after they did the first search that there was some skid marks in the area, as well as like a rubbery, gummy like residue. And eventually there was a local boy, I guess probably like a teenager, who came forward. His name is Max Lockard, and he mentioned like that before, like in between then, that he had driven his Chevy truck around the area looking for the alien. So if you have tread marks and some rubbery, maybe some like dirt or like tire residue, oil or whatever, it probably is what that was. So yeah, that's pretty much all the elements that they explain and like kind of what could have led to that all coalescing into the Flatwoods monster.
Yeah, and so I think after here, and this will transition into the other stories, which is that people probably around the time had the mindset of UFOs, like they're in their brain, and so this idea of this is something that could be a UFO, could have led people to doing this. So there are more stories than coming around this.
The first one actually is it's soon before the Flatwood monster was seen. So like the story you're about to read kind of adds to your point of what you were just saying, where like this is on the minds of the people there.
Of the people who've already had this happen.
That like before this even happened, somebody had seen something in the local, I think this is actually on the farm where the Flatwood monster was seen. So, but anyway, if you want to go ahead.
Yep. So here's what this reads. So another sighting of a creature similar in description to the Flatwoods monster was reported by Miss Audra Harper not long before the infamous sighting on Fisher's farm. Harper claimed to have seen the monster while walking through the woods near her home near the town of Heaters. Heaters is about 5 miles north of Flatwoods. Harper and her friend were walking by a nearby store. The road leading out of their property was impeccable and rusted, so they were taking a shortcut through the forest instead of walking the road, which would have increased their trip significantly. About a half mile into their trip, they noticed a ball of fire on one of the hills they were passing. Harper dismissed it, assuming that one of the neighbors was fox chasing. When she glanced back, she saw something unbelievable. The fire had vanished, and in the woods stood a tall, dark silhouette of a man figure. Terrified, Harper and her friends ran, escaping among the rocks and boulders strewn around the hillside. Okay, very interesting. So was this story passed around? Because this is obviously not as infamous as the Flatwoods Monster, even though the Flatwoods Monster happened second, technically, in chronological order in history.
I would assume so, just because they mention it kind of as context on here. And I mean, I think more generally, I feel like this is just what you hear about like local forests. Like even
it's just
the place the going back to vaguely referencing the thing that we did before with the audio issues, but like the place we were visiting there and kind of the stuff surrounding it. I think you see a lot in America, especially. I guess anywhere, but like here, a lot of folklore seems to be based on like there's something in the woods. You're out in the dark. Woods in the dark are scary too. Like when you're in the woods by yourself, or like when it's darker, it's just things just seem heightened, you know?
Yeah.
And just stories like this happen, and then I'm sure that stories like this, it being like in a town nearby Flatwoods, I'm sure if it wasn't this story, the kids I'm sure had heard countless others like it.
Yeah. Well, and you too have to think about the idea of maybe this person didn't have. We're like okay, this might have been something else, and then once this story gets told, they're like, oh, what if they were the same thing? Because it's kind of similar in story with the glowing orb and like this big tall man creature and stuff like that. It would make sense why they would be like, oh, what happens if this thing, what happens if our story is their story too, and we're all seeing the same thing?
It's connecting the dots.
Connecting the dots. It makes sense why the Flatwoods Monster is a little bit more popular because they like called the cops, and there was a whole thing with it, and like journalists got activated, and so it became this whole thing. So that makes sense to me. So then the next one is the day after, on September 12th. So the day after the September 12th incident in Flatwoods, another strange sighting occurred near Strange Creek, about 20 miles south of Flatwoods. Sorry, it's just Strange Creek.
What type of creek was that again?
I don't know.
I don't know. There's a lot of strange sightings at this
It's
creek.
a strange one.
I wonder what we should call this creek with all these strange sightings around it. I don't know.
It's just so strange. Reportedly, George and Edith Snitowski,
yeah,
and their 18-month-old son were driving through the rural area between Clay and Braxton County on Route 4 when their car suddenly died. Ooh. Mr. Snitowski attempted to restart the car to no avail. It was nighttime, and the road was deserted. While the Snitowskis were trying to decide what to do, a foul, sulfurous smell filled the air, and their baby began to cry. A strange bright light filled the darkness, and the couple witnessed a 10-foot-tall creature hovering in front of their car. It's terrifying. The description is similar to that of the original sighting, except that the monster was not wearing what is to presume to be its shaped hood. Instead, its head was reportedly reptilian and bony. The creature dragged its lizard-like hand across the hood of the car before drifting away into the woods. As soon as the monster was out of sight, the car restarted and the couple sped away. Snitowski would later give his account for Mail magazine in July of 1955. Mail magazine?
Yeah, I saw that too, and I was like, I gotta get me a copy of one of those, Sounds like right up my alley.
Right up my alley. Sounds like my demographic.
Sounds like targeted for me specifically as a male myself.
I'm just like, I'm a male. This sounds like it's kind of my magazine. That's just
Sign
funny
me
to
up.
think about. Sign me up. I'd like male magazine. Jeez. Okay, so, but that's it. That's pretty much the things that are around it. It became very sensational. Here it continues on to talk about, like, there's an ice cream shop that opened. There's huge chairs erected with the monster's image.
Yep.
Photo ops, stuff like that.
A lot of stuff in the town now is like kind of centered around that, like this.
Yeah,
mythos.
kind of like how it became with the Mothman in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Like it's become a thing to the point right now where the monster, to a lot of people, call it Braxie. It's been known as Braxie. So you will either find the Flatwoods monster or Braxie the monster as their more cute name. And that's everything that is with this interesting tale. So I'm interested, Ben, what do you think is going on here? What is probably the most plausible answer? Where are you thinking this is all leading to? I'm also interested if anybody wants to type off in the chat if they've heard anything, either live in the area or if they've heard anything about it. Because these other sightings are also here. They almost feel like really significant as well, but they're not talked about as much. So I'm wondering if they're just not as confirmed, almost, if that makes sense. Like it's just kind of like, well, I saw it too, type of thing. I swear that thing touched my hood and then drove away. Can you believe that? Like stuff like that. It's just, I'm interested. But anyway, what do you think, Ben? What's going on?
I don't know. I feel like the official explanation, not the official, I guess the mainstream kind of like, here's the natural explanation that isn't, it's an alien or it's a monster, cryptid of some kind, makes sense for the most part. I feel like this is a story I'll probably keep like in the back of my mind and like probably occasionally looking more into, because I feel like in all of my research there were just details that I still am not sure on, like how exactly did this play out. The big one, one of the big ones for me is the red light and what exactly. The phrase "ball of fire" is a very dramatic,
Broad,
like phrase of language,
Oh well, yeah.
It's a very like startling image to me of like you're in the woods and you see a ball of fire, like a biblical sign. Like biblical type sign, a burning bush, if you will, of just like
emanating,
and you see it like the second sighting that we read about. She saw burning a fire, and I think when it said like she assumed people were fox hunting, I think she just meant there were like people out hunting, and maybe there was like a campfire or something. But I just don't know what to do with that. And like the official explanation, everyone I see seems to only be addressing that. Oh, it was like a red light pulsating. And when I first read about this, like on Wikipedia, they mentioned that it does sound like, oh, it's just like one of those lights you see on planes or on towers. And if you're like walking up a hill and you're already kind of in like a mist and you just see like a red light in the distance, I can kind of see how you'd be like, oh, what's that? And then that's right before you run away. More than anything, I feel like it's just like the difference in explanations, the difference in like recountings of the events. There's a general consistency, but there's just little things as you go like newspaper to newspaper. And part of me wonders if that's just how these stories go, Like you start with what actually happened and then it gets passed around and then people tell it again and again, and you're on a TV program and you tell it again, and stuff just starts to get incorporated into the story that maybe wasn't initially part of it, but now it is. But yeah, I think like the core thing of like you see a mysterious figure that just so happens to look like an owl's head on top of like some shiny green stuff, and then it charges at you. It in my mind, I don't find it hard to believe like this was probably just like an owl. And I get like with like the culture prime the way it was, like of course the first thing you're gonna think when you see a thing flying overhead and then you see some weird stuff is like it's aliens, because like that's
Yeah.
that's what everyone's talking about. Like, dude, this is
Right.
This is what's happening other places. It's happening here.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I think like you add on the stuff that you see from Blue Book that's now been declassified. Like they eventually shut Project Blue Book down in the 60s because they were like, it seems like all of these cases or most of them can be explained by people being scared in a group, which is
Yeah.
like the technical definition of hysteria is just like a lot of people in a group seeing something and then their emotions feed off each other. And then you have like that combined with just something that's out of the ordinary, which I do know some people when I looked it up would talk about like the owl, like how would people who have lived here not know what an owl was? But also like
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a bunch of kids and a mother and they're out in the middle of the woods. I don't know, and like barn owls are nocturnal. Like unless you were like a hunter or somebody who's out in the woods a lot at night, I don't know if you would necessarily like have a lot of experience being like, oh yeah, that
Right.
nocturnal animal in the woods when I'm like 10 years old. It's like maybe, but I think it's plausible that it was just like that, and that's that's more what I would view as possible than I guess the only other explanation I can think of, which is just like an alien,
Right. An extraterrestrial.
which maybe who knows, but
being.
But yeah, what
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on it? Because I feel like you've maybe known more about this longer than I have in terms of like being
Yeah.
aware of it and maybe having
I mean,
ruminated on it.
Yeah, I remember this was the other thing, like Monster Quest. I remember we're talking about that show when we did the flying humanoids. I saw it too, and I was like, again, it's a very specific, strange occurrence. And like originally, what it was, it looked like it was like this lizard in like this big, almost like flying object type of thing. It's almost like more of what the guy talked about on the day after George and Edith. That their situation, it more sounded like that, which was the description, and then you put the mustard gas in. It's just all interesting.
Yeah.
So my theory is probably more towards, I don't know. It's significant enough for me to be like, this could be something. But I'd probably, if you were like, hold me at gunpoint and say, which one is it? I'd probably say, I think it's probably something where they're walking in, they see a meteor crash or something that scares them right away. They're already on edge, and
Yeah.
they're probably walking into this area that has some kind of sulfur spring or some of this natural gas that starts playing with your head, right? And then they see an owl, and the owl flies towards them.
Yeah.
And I think that enough right there, if I saw something with glowing eyes that flies towards me, I'd be immediately put off, and I'd probably think it's like some kind of monster. Because a lot of these things, you think they would be like, well, we saw it for like 50, like we saw it for like a whole minute. We were looking at it for a whole minute. They probably were looking at this thing for like at least 7 seconds, and that's about it.
Yep.
Like,
Yeah.
think about all the assumptions you could make in 7 seconds. Think about what your brain can do when it's afraid in 7 seconds. Like, so that's probably where I'm going to stand with it, is that I think it can all be chalked up to things that could be explained naturally. My biggest thing is just everything around it. Like, people saw stuff falling from the sky. It was like, well, there's a meteor crash, or like, is this plane crashes? Like, why so many plane crashes? That's just where it gets me of like, this is why I think it's a lot more mysterious, because there's just a lot of interesting details. Like, there's some sort of gas that happened and then it's gone. Like, stuff like that, where it's like, there's a lot of these details that are just not really described or even confirmed of what it is. So for that reason, I'm like, it's significant enough that this is a cryptid and that people think it's a cryptid. And if someone were like, I believe it's true, I'd be like, you know what? Go for it, man. Like, I don't know if I could come at you and say I have clear evidence to support not. However, I don't think this is an alien. Sorry.
Wow. How brave.
How brave.
I'm
I'm just trying to give like actual, like, this is actually what I think. This is actually what I believe.
Yeah.
I don't think it's an alien. I think it could be, but I think there's enough explainable things. And we showed the picture of the owl before, but for those listening online, like the owl, like it looks really similar to if
Yeah.
an owl was sitting on a bush. You know,
You
like
hear the description of the owl and then the greenery, and you just look at the design again. You're like, oh, yeah, it's like
Yeah.
a reddish. Which they even talk about like this specific. There's a specific type of barn owl that has like a reddish hue to it. The eyes, of
Yeah.
course, are gonna glow, and then all of the rest of the body just happens to be the color of like the stuff. So like tree, like you see it side by side, and you're kind of like, oh, yeah, that seems about right.
Yep.
I do think, like you're saying, even for me, who I feel like I'm much more skeptical of a lot of like the elements that would maybe be like supernatural in terms of like I don't know if I'd be as open to like, oh yeah, of course it's Bigfoot, you know, or whatever, as a lot of people would be. But there's enough here of like both things lining up just perfectly to create like this exact scenario, plus stuff that is, like you said, like there's not like a solid explanation for it. It's just like, oh yeah, the smell they had that they claimed was like burning their nostrils. It might have been the grass, but also like, why was it so intense for them? Like
Yeah.
there's, if you stretch it enough, the plausible explanation fits. And with like the core of it, with the figure, I'm like, yeah, that probably was an owl. But there's enough
Yeah.
around it that's unexplained, like you said, that makes me be like, if somebody were to say like, I think there was something supernatural here or paranormal or whatever the word is, I would be like, yeah, that's completely valid.
Yeah,
to
there's
be
plenty
like,
of other like
what
yeah,
is it?
Roanoke, for instance, is one that I remember us when we were talking about. We were like, okay, I don't understand how anybody could come in and be like,
It's
"They're
zombies.
aliens," or, "This is a zombies."
It's zombies.
This one to me is like, if someone came to me and said they believe this, I'd be like, you know what? Actually, I'm not necessarily convinced of my position either. So fair, you know, like it's interesting, it's significant. That's why I always say. That's why I usually use that term, and it's kind of like weird and esoteric, but it's significant to me. Like, this is something that is hard to explain, has a lot of weird circumstances around it, can be categorized in these places, but a lot of things would have to line up for that to be the truth. And do I think it's completely plausible to be that? Yeah, absolutely. But in the same token, it very much it's odd. It's odd. And that's all I will say.
It's
I'm
an
sticking to
experience where, like, if I went through that, I probably would come out of it being like, I might have just seen an alien. Like, I don't know. Like, like
I remember us too. We talked about it when we went on site for the one place we were
the lost
we were
episode
referencing.
that we're gonna
The
release
lost
eventually.
episode that
once
we'll release eventually.
We can remaster the audio in like 20 years and be like, oh, this was
it.
setting up the
Well,
lore,
yeah.
you know?
But there were like, you know, there's all these things of ghosts in this woods, and when we were walking out during the day, we could hear what sounded like just like, we're like, what is that? Then we immediately looked and we're like, oh, those are trees rubbing against each other. But at night, dude, I
Oh my
would have
gosh,
been
dude.
like
Yeah.
terrified. And that's what I'm saying. It's just, if you can create fear out of this stuff, I think that's where stuff can become like, well, we saw this thing. It's freaking creepy.
Yeah.
And then this guy's story, like, besides that, was like, yeah, we saw like a dude in the woods, and he, you know, we thought it was a hunter, but maybe it's not.
Yeah.
And then the other people were like, yeah, we saw this thing too, and it floated on top of our car and hissed at us, and then like walked away, which is like, I don't know if that's actually real, and obviously there's not enough, you know, proof to that situation. But this one is just like, it's the hysteria type
Yeah.
of thing.
That story specifically, which is, I feel like, almost like the most like out of pocket, where it's like, oh, this guy's car stops with his family, and then there's this figure. I do want to note that one, as far as I can tell, like, it happened the day after, but he didn't write about it until 3 years later. So
Yeah.
there's a skeptical part of me that's like, you have all this mythos build up. There's like, you know, it's the 50s. There's this continual like, oh, mysterious UFO thing. And then like later he's like, oh, actually the day after this story happened, dude. That's crazy. Like, I was in my car and then the same thing happened to me, and here's my story in this magazine that I'm getting paid to write. You know, like, that's crazy. Not to like completely discredit it, but that one,
Right.
I think there's a reason maybe that
It's
one's
hard.
secondary, because it's like, oh, that one's like a different thing that was mentioned years later.
Yeah,
but it was supposed to happen the day after. But it's like, okay, well, where does the storytelling end and the recounting of like an actual event begin? And how much of it is embellished compared to here's a thing that just happened and we have all these people interviewing eyewitnesses and second parties, third parties stepping in and seeing this from a more objective perspective. So yeah, fear, Hunter. It's the mind killer, as they do say
Fear's the mind killer
in
Yep.
Dune.
Dune.
In the
That's our
Smash Hit
second
series
pop culture
Dune.
reference. Our first pop culture reference was Dan to Dan. Second is Dune.
Yep, that's all you're getting. You gluttonous fools.
You greedy
all you're getting.
jerks.
No
Well-
more pop culture, except I guess the thing, I got Batman 89 on the TV there, so that's 3. That was actually what I was saying before when you walked away earlier. I was just like, here's
Can't
stuff
wait
on
to
my wall.
review that footage
Yeah.
to see you just yapping.
Yeah. Anyway,
Well, with that,
we solved it.
Ben, we solved it.
Another job well done.
Another job well done. So you want to end us out here, Ben?
Oh, I'd love to. I'd love to. So, with that, thank you all so much for joining us for another episode of Delphi National Park today. Links to the sources we cited, especially the ones we shouted out, I think we'll put in the description, as well as any important information. If you enjoyed the show and want to hear more, we would really appreciate it if you followed us, subscribed, like, all those buttons that
Comment.
you love to push. Obviously, give us feedback.
Put a bell icon up.
We're new to this,
Whatever that thing is.
so oh yeah, hit the bell, the notification
Yeah,
bell.
the bell icon. There
So
you go.
in
I was
3
like,
months when we upload again, you'll get the little notification.
we're gonna be better.
Please
two times a month.
Give us a rating or leave a comment. It depends on what platform you're on, but like give us feedback, because we'd love to make the show better and work on improving it. And yeah, just thank you for joining us around the campfire. We got plans coming up. We got
Plans.
plans for the future that I think will be actually pretty interesting. Some newer types of content and format and all that jazz. So stick around.
Yep.
Yeah.
Stick around for that. That'll
the
probably
journey.
come out later March or April. So just stay with us.
Yeah.
Until then, continue to watch. We'll be here. We're excited. That's about it. So goodbye.
Goodbye. See you all next time.
Bye. See you all next time.